Hello, everyone. Tonight, we are stepping into a story that begins not with fireworks or champagne, but with the quiet weight of a decision made out of love, and maybe a little desperation. The air is humid, heavy with late summer heat. I'm sitting in my living room, staring at my phone screen, fingers hovering above the transfer button. $42,000. That's what he needed. That's what I had. And somehow, what I felt obligated to give. He said he'd pay me back, said it was just a short-term loan, just until things settled. He was charming, convincing, even teary-eyed when he told me how the debt was crushing him. "It's the last thing holding me back," he said, voice trembling. "If I could just get out from under this, I could breathe again. We could breathe again." I remember that word. We. It sounded so promising, like a future. So I did it. I transferred the money, my entire savings account, the fund I'd built over years of freelance writing gigs, overtime shifts, and canceled vacations. I told myself it was okay, that this was what people did when they believed in each other, when they were building something real. He called me that night, said I was his angel, that he'd never forget what I did, that I'd saved him. Looking back now, I realize how easily people say thank you when they've gotten exactly what they wanted. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now? Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan to have some soft background music, and let's start our journey tonight. We met at a local bookstore. Not the trendy kind with neon signs and overpriced coffee, but a cozy one tucked between a laundromat and a hardware store. He was standing in the self-improvement aisle, flipping through a book called The Psychology of Winning. I was browsing nearby and made a joke about how it should be titled, The Psychology of Pretending You're Fine. He laughed. A real laugh, not forced, not hollow. That was how it started. He introduced himself as Eric, said he was an aspiring entrepreneur, recently out of a long-term relationship, trying to turn over a new leaf. I was cautious. I'd been hurt before, gaslighted, ghosted, emotionally discarded, but there was something about the way he listened that disarmed me. When he asked for my number, I hesitated. He noticed, smiled, and said, "I understand. Let me earn it." And somehow he did. The first few weeks were like a movie montage. Sunday hikes, lazy brunches, long talks about our childhoods. He'd show up with flowers, remember tiny details I'd mentioned, compliment the way I laughed at my own jokes. He had this ability to make me feel like I was the only person in the room, and I believed it. Every time. He told me he used to be in tech sales but had quit to launch his own online platform. Said it was just about to take off, but funding had been tight. I admired his risk-taking, his ambition. I'd been stuck in my 9-to-5 for years, always playing it safe. He made risk look romantic. Still, there were little things, subtle things. He never invited me to his place, always had an excuse. His housemates were messy, or he was in between rentals. He avoided phone calls when I was around, sometimes stepping out to take care of something real quick. He didn't post me on social media, said he wasn't into that, said people didn't need to know everything, but I ignored those things, because the version of him I saw, the kind, driven, broken but healing man, seemed so real, and because I wanted it to be real. Then, one evening over dinner, he dropped it into the conversation like it was nothing. "I've been dealing with this old loan that keeps following me," he said, pushing pasta around his plate. "I thought I had it handled, but it's resurfacing with interest. They're threatening legal action." I looked at him, worried. "How much?" He hesitated. 42,000? I asked. He shook his head. 1,000. It felt like a blow to the chest, but he didn't ask for anything, not then. He just sighed, rubbed his temples, said he'd figure something out, that he always did. The next few days, he grew quieter, moodier, canceled plans, said he was overwhelmed, that he might lose everything if the debt collectors took him to court. I hated seeing him like that. I'd never seen him so broken. And then, one night, he called me while I was washing dishes. His voice trembled. He said he didn't know what else to do, said he was going to lose everything, including me. "This debt is eating me alive," he whispered, "and I don't want to take you down with me." I stood there, water running, hands wet with soap, and felt my heart split. I had the money. It was my emergency fund, my someday safety net. But if this wasn't an emergency, if this wasn't the moment to prove how much I believed in him, what was? The next morning, I transferred it. He called minutes later, crying, said he couldn't believe someone loved him enough to do that I was his miracle. But something in me shivered. It wasn't from fear, not yet. It was something else. Like a part of me had just silently stepped off a ledge without checking if the ground was still beneath me. I didn't know it yet, but that fall had already begun. 2 weeks passed. At first, it felt worth it. Eric was lighter, freer. He joked more, called more, sent photos of his workspace at coffee shops with captions like, "Back in the grind thanks to my investor." He took me out to dinner, paid the bill, said, "You shouldn't have to worry about anything anymore." It felt like a win. Like we were winning. But the glow dimmed fast. It started small. A phone call he stepped out to take on our date night. I caught a glimpse of the caller ID. Lena. He said it was a friend from his business group. Then he started turning his phone face down on the table, and when I asked about it, he laughed it off. "You're getting paranoid, babe. I told you, nothing shady." Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe giving someone $42,000 makes you see shadows where there aren't any. But the signs kept piling up. One Friday night, he canceled dinner last minute. Claimed he was sick, but when I dropped off soup at his place, no one answered. The building was dark. I waited outside for half an hour before going home. The next morning, he texted, "Sorry, passed out early. Still feel awful. Can we reschedule?" But he posted a story later that afternoon. A boomerang of him clinking wine glasses with someone at a rooftop bar. The caption, "Needed this." I didn't say anything. Not then. I rationalized it. Maybe he was just trying to feel better. Maybe he didn't think I'd see it. Maybe I was overreacting. But doubt seeped in like water through a crack in the foundation. I started noticing other things. Designer clothes I'd never seen before, a brand new smartwatch, a gym membership he never mentioned. He said it was all business expenses. Said he'd landed a new client and had to upgrade his image. Said it was all coming together now, just wait and see. But I'd already seen too much. One evening, I was scrolling through our shared bank account. We'd linked it so we could plan a trip together, or so he said. I noticed a charge from a boutique jewelry store. Over $800. I stared at the transaction like it might vanish if I blinked hard enough. When I asked him, he looked annoyed. "It was a gift," he said. "For my sister, her birthday. I told you about it." He hadn't. He could see I didn't believe him, and that's when the mood shifted. "What's with the third degree?" he snapped. "You think because you loaned me money, you own me now?" That word, loaned, pierced deeper than he knew. "It wasn't about ownership," I said quietly. "It was about trust." "Then trust me," he shot back. I wanted to, I really did. But my gut twisted in knots every time he brushed off questions, every time he gave half-truths, every time his explanations changed. I started checking the account more frequently, tracking purchases, looking for patterns. What I found didn't comfort me. He was living large. He'd booked a spa retreat, had weekly meal deliveries, even joined a wine subscription club. And all of it was funded by our money. More accurately, my money. Then came the night I overheard him on the phone. He thought I was asleep, but I'd just come out of the shower. He was in the kitchen, speaking low but animated. I paused by the hallway. "I told her it was for the business," he said. "She bought it. Hook, line, and sinker." Silence. Then laughter. "I know. Easiest $40,000 I ever made." I didn't breathe. I didn't move. I just stood there, clutching the towel tighter, my heart thudding against my ribs like it was trying to warn me. When I walked in, he jumped. "Oh, hey babe, didn't hear you." "Who were you talking to?" I asked. "Just Tony, from the gym." He smiled too easily. "You said something about money." "What?" "Oh." He waved a hand. Inside joke. Don't take it seriously. But everything inside me was screaming to take it seriously. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I lay in bed next to him, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I had missed it all, wondering if I had been desperate to believe in someone again, if I had confused affection with intention, if, in my need to be seen, I had turned off my instincts. The next morning, he kissed me goodbye like nothing was wrong, and for the first time, I didn't say it back, because something had shifted, and I was starting to see the truth, clearer than I ever had before. Gaslight and gut feelings. I remember the moment that the fog of confusion settled in, thick and suffocating. I was sitting alone in our dimly lit living room, the silence draped over me like a heavy blanket. Something was wrong, a tangible shift in the air that made my pulse quicken. I tried to recall the conversation from the previous night when his words had danced dangerously close to betrayal, yet his voice had remained soft, almost soothing. I was determined to trust him, to believe that his explanations were innocent, but deep within, my gut whispered otherwise. The following day, as I sat at the breakfast table trying to focus on the mundane routine of pouring coffee and toasting bread, I sensed the strain in our interactions. Eric's eyes, usually warm and engaging, now flickered with an unsettling mix of indignation and confusion at the slightest question. Whenever I mentioned what I had overheard, he deflected with a dismissive laugh or a casual shrug. "You're just overthinking things," he would say, as if my concerns were trivial. Yet every fiber of my being screamed that something was off. Was it merely my imagination, or was I slowly being entangled in a web of gaslighting? Each time I brought up the subject of mysterious transactions or odd phone calls, he would shift the blame onto me, accusing me of being paranoid or insecure. "Why can't you trust me?" he'd ask, his tone equal parts hurt and irritation. The words stung, and I began to question my own perceptions. Was I exaggerating my suspicions? A part of me desperately wanted to believe that I was simply misreading innocent behaviors. But the recurring pattern of dismissals and false reassurances left me unsettled. One humid afternoon, I decided to confront him directly. With a trembling voice, I asked, "Eric, I need you to be honest with me. What is going on?" "I feel like there are secrets and lies that are being hidden." His reaction was immediate and controlled, yet laced with an undertone of condescension. "You always jump to the worst conclusions," he said firmly. "I'm doing everything I can for us, for our future." His words, intended to soothe, instead planted a seed of doubt. I couldn't shake the impression that his insistence on my mistrust was, in itself, a way to mask his own guilt. The gaslighting wasn't just in his words, it seeped into every interaction. Later that day, while I was reviewing our recent bank statements on my laptop, I discovered yet another charge that I couldn't recall approving. My hands began to shake as I scrolled through entries, each one a needle pricking my heart. When I brought this up to him that evening, he immediately played the victim. "Why are you snooping? I thought you trusted me," he hissed, his face reddening with anger. The accusation made me feel even more isolated, as if I were being set up to be the villain in my own story. Despite the mounting evidence and my gut's unwavering warnings, I hesitated to push him too hard. The fear of losing what we once shared held me back. I confined my mounting suspicions to late-night solitary moments, scribbling notes in a journal. I began to document every instance of deflection, every contradiction in his explanations, each one building a case that I was being systematically manipulated. I knew that acknowledging the truth would shatter the illusion of the man I once admired so deeply, but the thought of living in perpetual uncertainty was far more unbearable. One evening, after a particularly tense dinner, where his laughter had sounded forced, I found myself wandering the quiet corridors of my own thoughts. The internal battle between trusting the man I loved and recognizing the painful reality of his deceit tore me apart. I wrestled with the notion that maybe I was to blame for overanalyzing every little detail, that perhaps my history of past disappointments was clouding my judgment. But then, the evidence kept returning, like a recurring nightmare that I couldn't shake off. I recalled the night I overheard him laughing softly into the phone, the sound that now haunted my memories. That sound was a siren call, luring me into the realization that the man I had so willingly trusted was carefully orchestrating a narrative to control me. His casual dismissal when I questioned the odd charges, his furious accusations when I sought clarity, all pointed to a calculated effort to make me doubt my intuition. I began to feel as if I were walking on a tightrope between reality and manipulation, unable to discern the truth with certainty. The more I tried to talk to him, the more he seemed to twist the conversation, turning any evidence of his wrongdoing into a reflection of my own supposed paranoia. "You're just insecure," he would say, his voice lilting with pity and contempt. The very words that should have comforted me instead bruised my confidence. I started feeling small, questioning every decision and every feeling, wondering if I was overreacting to simple mistakes. There were nights when I'd lie awake, haunted by the thought that my trust had been the trigger for this unraveling drama. The realization that someone I loved could so subtly convince me of my own inadequacies was both disheartening and terrifying. I began to compile every detail, every conflicting word, determined to document the path of my own descent into self-doubt. Yet, the harder I tried to assert my feelings, the more I felt shut out, as though my inner voice were drowned out by the tide of his persuasive words. Over time, the gaslighting evolved into a constant, omnipresent force in our relationship, a psychological haze that dulled the line between reality and illusion. My gut feelings, once a source of inner strength, now became a battleground of conflicting emotions, where every whisper of suspicion was met with a barrage of rebuttals. I felt like an actor in a play, where the script was rewritten each time I spoke up, leaving me stranded in a scene that I couldn't escape. In those quiet moments, alone with my thoughts, I realized that the betrayal wasn't just in the lies or the hidden charges. It was in the slow, relentless erosion of my self-trust. The gaslighting had become a tool, a method to reframe the narrative in his favor, and by extension, diminish me. It forced me to question every memory, every feeling. I found myself standing in front of the mirror, searching for traces of the confident person I once was, only to see a reflection marred by uncertainty and self-doubt. That was when I knew that a turning point was near. The realization that I had been manipulated slowly began to crystallize. I resolved, amidst the turmoil and the aching loneliness, that I would no longer allow my gut feelings to be silenced by his persuasive denials. I began to reclaim my narrative, one piece of evidence and one raw emotion at a time. I promised myself that if the truth was buried beneath layers of lies and denial, I would dig it out, no matter how painful it might be. And so, with the weight of 1,000 doubts, I sat down to document every detail of our daily lives, every conversation that felt off-kilter, every inexplicable charge on our accounts. I knew the path ahead would be fraught with difficulty, with moments of despair and confusion. But I also knew that acknowledging these gut feelings was the first step toward breaking free of the manipulation that had so insidiously taken hold of our lives. My heart pounded with the resolve of someone who had seen the shadows lurking behind a facade of love and was ready to confront them head-on. I vowed that from that day forward, I would trust my gut and seek the truth, even if it meant facing the bitter reality of betrayal. I would no longer allow the gaslighting to blur the lines between what was real and what was fabricated. The journey was just beginning, but I sensed that reclaiming my own truth was the only way forward. In that moment of solitude, amid the flickering candlelight and the echoes of a once trusted voice, my determination solidified. I wouldn't be manipulated any longer. It was my birthday. I turned 33 that Saturday, and I remember waking up early, half expecting the warm embrace of a surprise, maybe breakfast in bed, or a sweet note tucked beneath my coffee mug. That's how it used to be when we were still in that golden haze of the relationship. But when I rolled over, Eric wasn't there. Just a cold imprint on the sheets beside me, and silence. I padded into the kitchen. Empty, No flowers, no card, no call. It was 9:23 a.m., and I told myself, maybe he's planning something big. Maybe he stepped out for cake or balloons or something. So I waited. I scrolled social media, sipped lukewarm coffee, and replayed the voice in my head, trying to soothe the growing ache in my chest. By noon, there was still no word. I texted him. Just a simple, "Morning. Everything okay?" No response. By 3, I'd gone from concerned to anxious, and then angry. Around 5 o'clock, he finally walked through the door, smelling faintly of cologne and carrying a crumpled takeout bag. "Hey," he said casually, like it was any other day. I blinked. "Do you know what day it is?" He looked up, genuinely puzzled. "Saturday?" "My birthday, Eric." He paused for a beat too long. "Oh, right." He winced. "Work was insane. I meant to text. I'm sorry. But hey, your favorite pad thai?" He held up the bag like a peace offering, but it felt more like a slap. I sat down, staring at the floor. Not because of the forgotten gift or the missing card. Not even because he'd gone radio silent for half the day. It was because that day, I finally saw him clearly. Not the charming man who once sent me handwritten notes. Not the guy who once danced with me barefoot in the rain. Number this was someone else. Someone who had stopped seeing me altogether. We ate in silence. I forced a few bites. He scrolled through his phone between mouthfuls. And that's when I saw it. Out of habit, I opened our shared bank app, mostly to check if a paycheck had hit. But instead, I saw a new transaction from earlier that morning. The name of the store jumped out like a slap across the face. Roche and Will's Jewelers, $2,440. I stared at it for a long time. That wasn't a store I'd ever visited. And it certainly wasn't where he'd picked up the greasy takeout now sitting between us. I looked at him. "Did you go to a jewelry store today?" He didn't even flinch. "What?" Number I turned the screen toward him. "Then what's this?" He glanced at the phone. "Oh, that." "Yeah." I stopped by briefly. "I was thinking about getting you something, but they didn't have what I wanted. Must have rung it up by mistake. I'll dispute it." His voice was smooth. Too smooth. "Rung it up by mistake?" "Yeah, it happens. You know how those places are." Except I didn't, because that's not how credit card transactions work. And even if it was a mistake, why hadn't he mentioned it when he walked in empty-handed? The questions piled on top of each other like bricks, heavy and damning. "So you were out shopping for me, but didn't wish me a happy birthday?" I asked, my voice quieter now. He sighed, already annoyed. "Babe, I said I was sorry. You're blowing this out of proportion." There it was again. The brush off. The redirection. As if my hurt was an overreaction. As if I was being dramatic for expecting my partner to remember my birthday. I didn't say much for the rest of the evening, but I did excuse myself early, claiming I had a headache. He barely looked up from his phone as I left the room. In the sanctuary of the bathroom, I locked the door, sat on the cold tile, and opened my laptop. This time, I didn't just check the bank. I pulled up my email and found the digital receipts tied to the joint card. My hands trembled as I scanned through them. The $2,440 charge wasn't for browsing. It was a payment in full for a custom diamond pendant, engraved. But the name on the order form wasn't mine. It was Lena. I felt the air leave my lungs like I'd been punched. Lena, the same name that had flashed on his phone weeks ago. The same woman he said was a business contact. The one he laughed with late at night when he thought I was sleeping. My birthday gift was a lie, and the real gift had gone to someone else. I pressed my palm against my chest to calm the racing beat of my heart. I wanted to scream, but instead, I just sat there, frozen, betrayed, and humiliated in a way I hadn't known was possible. How do you recover from realizing your birthday, the one day meant to celebrate you, was the backdrop for someone else's romance? I closed the laptop, wiped my face, and looked into the mirror. There I was, eyes tired, expression blank, the faintest trace of mascara smudged beneath one eye. But something was different, not broken, not shattered. No, something had awakened. The part of me that had been too forgiving, too hopeful, too willing to explain away the cracks. She was starting to fade. And in her place, someone quieter, sharper, and more watchful was beginning to rise. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about the name. Lena. It echoed in my mind, sharp and unrelenting. I wanted to tell myself it was all a misunderstanding, that the pendant was for a cousin or a colleague, that maybe Lena was a middle name he'd never mentioned. But deep down, I already knew. I just didn't know how deep the lie went. So I started digging. That Sunday, while Eric went out for a meeting, I stayed home and accessed our shared account, again. I downloaded every bank statement for the last 6 months, cross-referenced it with emails, screenshots, even the gift receipts he'd forgotten to delete from our cloud drive. The web was wide, subtle, cruel. There were dinner charges from restaurants I'd never been to, ride shares from neighborhoods we never visited, and more than a few purchases labeled as gifts, none of which I ever received. The jewelry store was only the beginning, but it was the apartment that nearly knocked the air from my lungs. One charge from a leasing agency caught my eye. I searched the name online and found it was tied to a mid-rise condo complex across town. Modern, sleek, expensive. Not the kind of place someone with lingering debt should be frequenting. There were 3 payments, 1 security deposit, and 2 monthly rents, each over $2,000. That same afternoon, I drove there. I wore sunglasses and a hoodie, pretending I was on a call as I stood across the street. The building was beautiful. A row of silver mailboxes glinted in the sun. I couldn't go inside. It was access controlled. But I didn't need to. I just needed confirmation. A nameplate near the buzzer read, L. Rivera, 5 B. Lena. And just like that, the knot in my stomach twisted into something uglier. I pulled out my phone and opened up social media. I didn't have her name at first, but Eric had once tagged A at @lenariv__ in an old gym selfie he forgot to delete. Her profile was public. She was beautiful, of course. Tan skin, jet black hair, almond eyes. Every post was polished and curated. Gym mirror selfies, smoothies, brunch tables. And one, 3 weeks ago, stood out from the rest. It was a picture of her hand, manicured and delicate, holding up a necklace with a glittering diamond pendant. The most unexpected gift, you always know how to surprise me. The pendant. My birthday gift. I sat there in my car, heart pounding so loud I was afraid someone might hear it. There were more posts, subtle ones, blurry snapshots of someone's shoes across a table. A side profile cropped out just enough to hide his face. But I knew those shoes. I'd bought them for Eric's birthday. Each photo was dated, each one a silent stab. One caption said, "He said he'd leave her soon." My throat burned. He'd told her about me, and told me nothing about her. It was no longer a question of whether I was being lied to. It was now about how much of my life had been a carefully managed illusion. When Eric got home that night, I pretended nothing was wrong. I greeted him with a kiss on the cheek and asked about his meeting. He smiled, said it went great, then told me Lena had gotten engaged to someone else. Weird coincidence, he chuckled. Remember her? From that business circle? Saw it on Instagram, I nodded slowly. Guess she moved on? He didn't blink. He just opened a beer, kicked off his shoes, and turned on a documentary. I sat beside him on the couch, heart beating like a war drum, watching the reflection of the screen in his eyes. He was calm, relaxed, so comfortable in the lie, it was second nature. But I was not the same woman I'd been a week ago. That night, when he fell asleep, I slipped into the living room with my laptop and made copies of everything. Bank statements, receipts, screenshots of Lena's posts, all of it. I stored them on a hard drive and emailed backups to a private address. I even took photos of the credit card with my name on it that he used for most of these purchases. just in case. I even took photos of the credit card with my name on it that he used for most of these purchases. Just in case. I wasn't going to confront him yet. Not until I had every piece of the puzzle. Because when I walked away this time, I wanted to leave with more than just heartbreak. I wanted the truth. And I wanted proof. The next step? Finding out just how long the apartment had been in use. I reached out to a friend of mine, Jill, who worked in property management, and casually asked her if she could help me find out a move-in date based on a tenant name. She owed me a favor from years ago. Later that night, she called me back. Lease started 5 months ago, she said. Paid up front in cash. I asked, do you know who signed it? She hesitated. You're not gonna like this. Tell me. His name's on the lease, Eric J. Langford. My fingers tightened around the phone. He hadn't just been visiting Lena. He lived there. While I slept alone in our bed some nights, telling myself he was at late meetings or crashing at a friend's, he had been home, just not with me. That was the final cut. He didn't just lie. He didn't just steal. He built a second life. With my money. And suddenly, all the kindness, all the thank yous, all the promises of a shared future meant nothing. I turned off the phone and turned on the light in my mind that had been dimmed far too long. The illusion was over. Now it was time to start planning my exit. Not as a victim, but as someone reclaiming everything she lost. The confrontation didn't come with shouting or broken plates. It came with silence. Cold, calculated, and devastating. By the time I stepped into apartment 5B, Lena already knew who I was. And I already knew who she thought I was. I hadn't planned on meeting her, not yet, but fate doesn't care about perfect timing. That Wednesday afternoon, Jill called again, her voice hesitant. You said you wanted confirmation, right? She said. Well, you won't believe this. The management office logged a delivery for Unit 5B. Same last name as yours. That's not a coincidence. She was right. It wasn't. I told myself I'd just walk past the building, maybe glimpse something. But I ended up walking to the front desk. My fingers were trembling when I gave a fake name and said I was dropping off a package for Eric. The doorman, young, disinterested, buzzed me through. And then I was inside. The elevator ride was excruciating. My reflection in the mirrored doors looked foreign. Lips pressed tight, eyes stormy. But I didn't flinch. The door to 5B was ajar. Someone had propped it open with a pair of glittery heels. I knocked once, quietly. Hello? A voice called. You can just leave it on the... She appeared in the doorway. Lena, the Lena. Hair damp from a shower. No makeup. Wearing one of Eric's hoodies. Her expression shifted the moment she saw me. Confusion first, then caution. I held up my phone. I think you and I need to talk. She didn't answer right away, just tilted her head like she was trying to place me. Who are you? I took a breath. I'm the woman who paid off Eric's debt. The one he said he was committed to. The one he lied to, repeatedly. She blinked. Her fingers gripped the doorframe. You're her? Yes. We stared at each other, the silence stretching between us like a tightrope. She stepped aside without a word. Inside, the apartment was pristine. Warm lighting, cozy furnishings. A row of framed photos lined a shelf. Pictures of Lena and Eric on hikes, at brunch, at what looked like a wine tasting. Moments he'd never shared with me. Moments he told me he was too busy for. Lena sat down slowly. She looked more curious than defensive. He said you were unstable, that you wouldn't leave him alone, that you made up stories to ruin him. I laughed, bitter and soft. Did he also say I bought him that watch, or covered the down payment for his car? Her lips parted. Wait, what? I pulled out my phone, opened the files, and slid it across the coffee table. She scrolled. And scrolled. Her face lost color. Receipts, screenshots, the bank statements, jewelry invoices. Is this real? I lived with him, I said. He used our joint account. He gave you the necklace he bought with my money. On my birthday. Her fingers hovered over the screen. He told me that Pendant was an inheritance. My eyes narrowed. He said it was for me. She looked stunned, like something inside her cracked. I thought we were building something, she whispered. So did I. A long pause. Then, he told me he was planning to leave you. That it was complicated. That's what he told me about you, I replied. We sat there, two strangers bound by the same betrayal. Different positions, same pain. Lena stood and walked to a drawer, pulled something out. A journal. She flipped through it, then showed me a page. A handwritten budget. Eric's handwriting. Line item. Repayment to S. Note. Stall. Deny if confronted. I stared at the page. Who's S? She asked. That's me, I whispered. She blinked hard, her jaw clenched. That liar. Neither of us spoke for a while. Eventually, she looked up. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, I said, but I'm done being quiet. I'm done making excuses for him. She nodded. Then, surprising both of us, she said, If you need a witness, for whatever you decide to do next, I'll back you. We exchanged numbers, and when I left that apartment, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I felt sharp, grounded, focused. That night, when Eric came home, he walked in like everything was normal, tossed his keys in the bowl, kissed my cheek, and asked what I wanted to watch. I smiled. Whatever you want, I said. He grinned, flopped on the couch, and pulled out his phone, probably texting Lena, not knowing what had happened hours before. I went to the bedroom, closed the door, and opened a spreadsheet I'd been working on quietly for the last 2 days. A timeline of every lie, every purchase, every forged withdrawal and false deposit. I titled the file, Exit Strategy, Final, because I wasn't just planning to leave. I was planning to leave with receipts, and this time he wouldn't be able to sweet-talk his way out of the mess he created. He thought he was playing 2 women against each other, but now he'd unknowingly united us. And that? That was going to be his biggest mistake yet. There's a particular kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being doubted. Eric was clever, manipulative, yes, but clever in a way that made him dangerous. After I confronted Lena, I thought I'd feel immediate clarity, a sense of relief. But instead, I found myself plunged into a strange kind of silence. The kind where you begin to notice how much he's been managing not just your thoughts, but your reality. He didn't just lie. He planted narratives. In my head, in our friends' heads, even in his own. That week, I noticed the shift. Subtle, but calculated. Our mutual friends stopped replying as quickly. One couple canceled dinner. Another ghosted me completely. Eric told me they were just busy, but I knew better. He had gotten ahead of me, spun the story, planted the seeds. She's been under a lot of stress, I imagined him saying with that charming, concerned tone. I love her, but she's been fragile. I was being cornered emotionally, softly pushed out of the world we'd built together. One polite conversation, one dismissive smile, one raised eyebrow at a time. I remembered when we first moved into this apartment. We threw a tiny housewarming with mismatched chairs and plastic champagne flutes. I baked lemon bars. He made a playlist. We danced barefoot at midnight, our laughter echoing in an empty living room. That room now felt like a set, something staged for memories that had already curdled. I tried talking to him, testing the waters. Do you think people change when they have something to hide? I asked one night as we washed dishes. He looked up, blinked slowly. What are you getting at? Just a thought. He dried his hands, kissed my forehead. You always overthink things, he whispered. It was meant to soothe, but to me, it felt like a leash being pulled tighter. From that moment, I stopped trying to pull away. I let him believe I was folding, that his stories were working, that I was shrinking, because I needed time. I started keeping my real work computer in the office, locking it every time I stepped away. My private Gmail account, one he didn't know existed, was where I forwarded every document, every receipt, every credit card statement. Lena helped too. We weren't friends, at least not in the way people imagine, but we were allies in truth. She sent me texts now, screenshots of messages Eric sent her, proof that, even after I confronted her, he was still lying. She's exaggerating things, just going through something right now. Don't let her manipulate you, babe. You and I are the real thing. Just wait a little longer. Every word he wrote became another brick in the wall I was building between us. But the final blow came when I checked our joint account one morning and noticed a strange transfer. $3,800. To a bank I didn't recognize. Labeled L. Rivera Savings. I stared at the screen for a long time. He wasn't just cheating emotionally. He was transferring my money to her. After all the lies, after the confrontation, after I stood in that woman's living room and laid out the truth. He still thought I was stupid enough, or scared enough, to miss it. I sat there numb. Then I picked up my phone and called my older brother. Mark is a lawyer, not flashy, not litigious, but precise, calm. He listened carefully, then asked, "Do you have proof?" "I have everything." He let out a breath. "Then it's time." That afternoon, I did something I'd never done in our entire relationship. I took back control. I opened new accounts, removed Eric from anything he was linked to, canceled cards, froze credit lines, filed a fraud alert with the bank, all of it documented, all of it signed. I moved money, called the landlord, started the process to end the lease, and then I waited. That evening, Eric walked in with his usual bravado, tossing his gym bag on the couch and flashing me a crooked smile. "Long day?" he said. "What's for dinner?" I smiled back. "Thought we'd order in. Want Thai?" He nodded. "Pad see you. You know the drill." I nodded too. But the truth was, I already knew everything. His routines, his lies, his tricks. I just needed one more night. While he showered, I slid the hard drive into my tote bag, packed it with essentials, phone charger, a folder of printed documents, and a flash drive labeled simply, "Exit." He came out in a towel, humming. I handed him his dinner, sat beside him, and watched one more episode of a show we never finished. He reached for my hand. I let him take it, but I didn't squeeze back. Because this wasn't intimacy, it was strategy. The next morning, he left early for meetings, and I left for good. No goodbye, no note, no explanation. Just a hollow apartment echoing with all the things I never said. He would come home to nothing. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted peace. And that peace started the moment I realized I was never crazy, never paranoid, just trapped in a lie so tightly woven, even the truth had trouble breathing. Now I was breathing again, and I had more than a story, I had proof. And very soon, everyone else would have it too. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. The first time, I didn't. I wanted to believe in who he could become, who he said he was, who I hoped he might be if I just gave him enough time, enough love, enough trust. But the man I had invested in wasn't a damaged soul looking to heal. He was a con artist in a relationship costume, an emotional puppeteer who mistook my kindness for weakness. And that last confrontation? It wasn't a screaming match. It wasn't theatrical. It was calm, deadly calm. 2 days after I moved out, Eric called. Over and over. I didn't answer, not the first time or the second. Not even when he texted, "Where are you?" I'm worried, but on the third day, I picked up. "Hey," I said flatly. "Oh my God, finally, I've been going out of my mind. Are you okay? What's going on?" I let him talk. I let him panic. Then I said, "You sent $3,800 to Lena's savings." "From my account." Silence. "You lied, over and over, and you never stopped, even when you knew I knew." His voice cracked. "Babe, listen, that wasn't what it looked like." It's always not what it looks like, right? The pendant? Not what it looked like. The second apartment? Not what it looked like. Even Lena, she was just a friend, a business contact. You kept saying that until she and I met. And even then, you kept lying. I was trying to fix it. No, you were trying to control it. Silence again. Then something shifted in his voice. The panic softened, replaced by something colder. What do you want from me? Money? An apology? And there it was, the final reveal. He didn't think he'd done anything wrong. He thought I'd woken up too soon. I didn't answer his question. I just said, "Check your inbox." He hung up. 5 minutes later, he called again. I didn't answer, because by then, I knew he had seen what I sent. Copies of every bank transfer. Screenshots of Lena's messages. The apartment lease with his name on it. A log of every purchase made with my card. And a draft letter from my lawyer. I had given him the whole picture. Not to negotiate, not to threaten. To end it. The next day, I filed an official fraud complaint. The bank launched an internal investigation, and while I didn't press criminal charges yet, I froze every account he had access to. Changed passwords. Alerted all financial institutions of potential identity theft. But the emotional damage? That didn't disappear with a click. I learned quickly that the worst betrayals don't come with blood. They come with blame. When you're told you imagined it, that you're the problem, that you're too sensitive, too emotional, too hard to love, Eric had built that narrative not just around me, but around everyone in our lives. And now, he was scrambling to keep the pieces together. I started hearing from mutual friends again. "Hey, can I ask something?" One text said. "Eric told me you had a breakdown or something, but I saw Lena's Instagram." Another, "I'm so sorry, I didn't know. He said you were moving out to get space." That's what manipulators do. They frame the story before you even get a chance to speak. They count on your silence to keep their version alive. But I wasn't silent anymore. I sent the truth, calmly, clearly, to the people who mattered. Some walked away, unsure who to believe. Some apologized, and a few came back and said, "We always had a weird feeling about him, but we didn't know what to say." It hurt, but it also healed, because little by little, I reclaimed my voice, not the shaky, uncertain voice I had at the end of that relationship, the one that second-guessed everything, the one that tiptoed around his moods. This voice was mine, steady, unafraid, unapologetic. Eric tried calling again a week later, left a voicemail. "This is getting out of hand. You don't need to ruin my life over this." But he'd already done that himself. He chose the lie. He chose the theft. He chose to treat my love like a debit card, something to swipe, drain, and discard when empty. I'd spent the last year trying to keep our relationship alive, like a houseplant on the edge of dying, adjusting the light, changing the water, pruning the dead leaves. But it was never going to bloom, because he never planted roots. He only ever took. And that realization, that liberation, was the first step toward a life where I stopped explaining my pain and started honoring it. There was one more thing left to do. That evening, I opened a private email and sent a message. To Lena. Subject line, final update. "I've moved out. The bank is investigating the fraud. I've filed reports with the proper authorities. You should protect yourself too. I don't know what you'll choose to believe next, but I'm done fighting to prove what I already know. He used both of us. That's who he is. Take care of yourself." I didn't expect a reply, and I didn't need one, because this wasn't about her anymore. It wasn't even about him. It was about me, about choosing myself finally. After months of betrayal, manipulation, gaslighting, and grief, I'd reclaimed the one thing he never truly had: my dignity. And this time, I wasn't going to let it go for anyone. I didn't cry the day I left him. Not in the way people expect. There were no sobs into a pillow, no desperate gasps for air on the bathroom floor. The tears had already come and gone in the quiet weeks leading up to that morning. I had cried the night I saw the pendant. I had cried when Lena looked at me and realized we were both fooled. I had cried when I finally admitted to myself that the man I loved never really existed. But the day I left, I was dry-eyed, focused, free. That morning, I picked up the last box from the storage unit. A few old books, a plant he never watered. The sweater he used to say looked best on me. It smelled like eucalyptus and betrayal. I folded it neatly and set it on the passenger seat. Not because I planned to wear it again, but because I needed to carry the last weight of that chapter to its conclusion. I dropped the key off with the landlord and signed the lease termination papers. Eric hadn't even bothered to show up. I half expected him to fight it, to send a last-minute text begging me to reconsider. But there was nothing. No apology, no confession, just silence, which said more than words ever could. I drove to my brother Mark's house on the other side of town. He greeted me with a long hug, one that didn't require explanation. "You sure?" he asked as we unloaded the car. "Positive," he smiled. "You know, most people would have fallen apart." I paused, considering that. "I did fall apart," I said. "I just built something better afterward." His guest room became my sanctuary. It wasn't glamorous. Bare walls, a creaky bed frame, one small window overlooking his fence. But it was safe, quiet, honest. I set up a little desk in the corner and plugged in my laptop. That night, I opened a fresh document titled, "Everything He Taught Me." It wasn't a revenge letter. It wasn't a list of grievances. It was a reflection, a purge of all the twisted lessons I had unknowingly learned. Lesson 1. Love without boundaries is just self-sacrifice. Lesson 2. Manipulators don't need fists. They use smiles. Lesson 3. Your gut is your oldest, truest friend. Listen to it. Lesson 4. Silence is a language too. And when someone chooses silence in the face of your pain, they're saying everything you need to hear. I wrote until my fingers ached. And when I was done, I saved the file. Not to reread it, but because it mattered that I had named the wounds, that I hadn't let them vanish into unspoken shadows. In the days that followed, I started reaching out to clients again, freelance work I had put on hold during the storm of my relationship. Most responded quickly, with kindness. A few even said, "Glad to see you back." That meant more than they knew. Rebuilding wasn't glamorous. I didn't wake up glowing or inspired. I woke up tired, stiff, and wondering how I ever let someone chip away at me so slowly that I didn't even notice. But I did the work. I changed all my passwords, got a new phone number, updated my resume. I even made a small spreadsheet titled Financial Comeback Plan, where I mapped out every dollar I needed to recover and how long it would take. $42,000. It looked massive at first, but I remembered I earned that money once. I could do it again. Lena messaged me once during this time. Just a single line. He moved out. I told him I knew. He didn't deny a thing. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because I no longer needed anything from that world. Not updates, not justice, not closure, just distance. Complete, peaceful, clean distance. Still, sometimes, when the nights were long and the wind rattled the window, I'd lie awake and wonder, did he ever feel sorry? Did he ever realize what he'd destroyed? And the truth is, maybe he did. But it didn't matter. Because remorse without change is manipulation in a prettier outfit. And I wasn't buying it anymore. One morning, I went for a walk around the lake near Mark's neighborhood. It was quiet, foggy, the water still as glass. Ducks skimmed across the surface like nothing in the world could ever disturb them. And I thought, this is what healing feels like. Not a dramatic moment, not a triumphant scream, but this, calm water, a full breath, a heart that beats without racing. I stopped at a bench overlooking the water and closed my eyes. There were no memories of him here, no places he'd touched, no lies he'd told. Only me, and the wind, and the slow, steady return of a life that was always mine. I pulled out my phone and deleted his contact. Not out of anger, out of grace, out of finality. I whispered goodbye, not to him, but to the girl who kept trying to fix someone who was never broken, just cruel. And in that quiet moment, I realized I wasn't rebuilding my life from scratch. I was reclaiming it, brick by brick, breath by breath, on my terms, in my time, with all the strength he never saw in me. I left without saying goodbye. No handwritten note on the kitchen counter, no text explaining why the closets were empty, no voicemail full of tears and second chances. Just silence, because I had already said everything I needed to say. In my actions, in the way I quietly took back every piece of myself he tried to claim. But leaving wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. In the weeks that followed, I moved through the world like a woman watching her own life from the outside. Familiar streets felt different, safer, like the spell had lifted, and I could finally see the cracks in the pavement. The same way I could now see the cracks in every memory with Eric. I didn't avoid the places we used to go. I reclaimed them. The brunch cafe, where he once accused me of embarrassing him for asking the waiter too many questions. I went alone, ordered the same waffles, and left a generous tip. The bookstore where we met, I returned and bought a new journal, one with thick pages and a hard cover. A place for truths, not illusions. And that same park bench where he told me he loved me for the first time, I sat there again. But this time, I didn't look for meaning in the past. I looked forward. One by one, I began to close the loops that had tethered me to him. I canceled a gym membership he had secretly used more than I ever had. I received a letter from the bank confirming he had been removed from all shared accounts, and that the fraud claim had been officially validated. He'd drained $9,212 beyond what I already knew. They were pursuing recovery. That night, I opened a bottle of wine. Not to celebrate exactly, but to mark the moment. Not a victory, but a restoration. Piece by piece, the person I was before him, before the gaslighting, the manipulation, the lies, began to return. Except, she wasn't exactly the same. She was sharper now, softer too, but not in the vulnerable way. In the way that a worn sea stone becomes smooth, not weak, after crashing against the same rocks over and over again. One evening, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It was him. "Hey, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I wanted to say I'm sorry for everything." He paused. "I miss you." I deleted it without listening to the rest. Because I didn't miss him. I missed the version of myself that used to believe that people who said, "I love you," couldn't hurt you this deeply. And I was never going back to her. Instead, I poured my energy into something else, helping other women. Quietly, at first. I joined an online forum under a pseudonym, shared my story in pieces, offered guidance, resources. Eventually, I was invited to speak at a local women's wellness event. Just 10 people, no stage, just a circle of folding chairs in a community center. I told my story not as a victim, but as someone who had once been blind and was no longer ashamed to say it. Afterward, a woman in her late 40s hugged me with tears in her eyes. "I thought it was just me," she whispered, and I told her the truth. We all think that. Until we finally speak. The power of that moment stayed with me, because it wasn't just about Eric. It never really was. He was the storm, but I was the one who rebuilt after the flood. One nail, one board, one boundary at a time. And yes, there were days I still grieved, but I never once wished to go back. I didn't want the fantasy. I wanted the truth. And that's exactly what I was living now. Truth in my solitude. Truth in the way I laughed again, loudly, without checking if someone was annoyed. Truth in the way I could look at myself in the mirror and believe her. Believe that she had done something incredibly brave. She walked away. Not just from a man, but from the version of herself who accepted less. I used to think healing meant forgetting. That moving on required erasing the past. Like I could scrub the memories clean and rewrite them into something softer, something less sharp. But I was wrong. Healing isn't forgetting. It's remembering without flinching. And that's what I was learning to do. 6 months had passed since I left Eric. In that time, I had rebuilt more than my bank account. I had rebuilt a version of myself that no longer apologized for her instincts, one that didn't shrink in the presence of doubt or gaslighting, one who no longer begged for crumbs of affection from someone who couldn't love without conditions. I'd moved into a small studio apartment. It wasn't much. White walls, creaky floorboards, a bathroom mirror with a tiny crack in the corner. But it was mine. Every corner of it. I chose the bedding. I decided which mugs lined the kitchen shelf. No more wondering if a sudden purchase was hiding a lie. No more pretending things were okay just to keep the peace. There was only peace. One evening, as I unpacked a box I had forgotten to open, I found an old journal wedged between two dog-eared novels. I flipped through it. The pages were from my first few months with Eric. They were full of hope, gushing entries about how attentive he was, how seen I felt, how I finally thought I'd found my person. I didn't cry reading it. I smiled, sadly, yes, but also with a sense of compassion. Not for him, for her. For the version of me who still believed that love meant sacrificing your needs, that if someone lied, it was because they were hurting. That loyalty meant standing by someone even when they were the ones tearing you apart. I gently tore out one page, the one where I had written in big, looping letters. I would do anything for him. I folded it twice and burned it over the kitchen sink. Not as an act of vengeance, but as a funeral. A quiet goodbye to the girl who thought her worth came from how much she could endure. I'd endured enough. Now I was living differently. I was building new relationships with people who didn't flinch at honesty, who didn't make me feel small for asking questions. I reconnected with old friends I had drifted from during my relationship with Eric. One of them, Maya, asked me over coffee, "Do you ever miss him?" The question surprised me, but I answered honestly. "No," I said. "I miss who I thought he was, but not the person he really was." Maya nodded. "You seem different now." "I am," I said. "I used to need someone to love me so badly, I ignored every red flag. Now I just need me to love me enough not to walk into fire for someone who hands me the matches." She smiled. "That's growth." I smiled too, because it was. I had spent so long chasing the illusion of connection that I'd ignored the disconnection within myself. Now I was doing the opposite. I was listening to myself first, honoring the uncomfortable feelings instead of silencing them. It was strange at first, saying no without over-explaining, setting boundaries without guilt, choosing solitude over company that drained me. But it got easier, and then it felt natural, and finally, it felt empowering. I got back to work fully, took on new freelance clients, said yes to projects that excited me, and no to the ones that didn't. I even raised my rates, something I never had the courage to do before. One client, a woman named Cassandra, noticed my confidence and asked if I would be interested in co-hosting a virtual panel on women in business. I said yes. That panel became the start of something bigger. She introduced me to others. And soon, I found myself speaking more often, not just about work, but about boundaries, betrayal, healing. I didn't share every detail of what had happened with Eric, but I shared what mattered. That love is not supposed to feel like confusion, that gaslighting is real, that survival can look quiet, and rebuilding can take time. But it's possible. And with every story I told, I shed one more layer of shame. One more lie he planted. One more part of myself I had given away that I now took back. The transformation wasn't overnight, but it was real, and it was earned. Every time I looked around my new apartment, every time I brewed my own coffee and sat down at my desk to write without fear, I reminded myself, this is the life I built after betrayal, not in spite of it, because of it. Because what he tried to break only revealed what was strongest in me. He didn't teach me love, he taught me endurance. And I, finally, had turned that endurance into freedom. I never expected to end up in a courtroom because of love. But then again, I never expected love to come with forged signatures and stolen funds. It wasn't about revenge. It was about truth and holding someone accountable for the choices they made, even if, once upon a time, you loved them. When I first spoke with my lawyer, Mark had recommended a woman named Julia. I was nervous. I kept second-guessing whether I was making too big a deal out of everything, whether I should just move on quietly. But Julia didn't flinch when she read through the file I gave her. Her brow furrowed as she flipped through screenshots, bank statements, and records of unauthorized transfers. "Did he have your permission for any of these?" she asked. "No." "Was your name the only legal holder on this business card?" "Yes." "Did he ever attempt to pay any of this back?" I hesitated. "No." She nodded, crisp and professional. "Then this isn't just emotional betrayal. It's financial misconduct, and it can be classified as fraud." It was the first time someone outside of my circle named it so plainly. Fraud. I wasn't being dramatic. I wasn't overreacting. This wasn't a messy breakup. It was a crime. We started the process formally, gathering everything, submitting the reports, alerting the financial institutions involved. It wasn't just about my personal loss anymore. It involved my professional funds, some of which had been diverted from my freelance work account, thanks to a joint transfer Eric manipulated. The banks took it seriously. So did the state. Eric, on the other hand, didn't. At first, he ignored the notices. Then, he replied with a vague denial letter claiming I had offered the funds as gifts and was now retaliating because our relationship ended. That letter was his undoing, because in it, he admitted to receiving the money. And more importantly, he never disputed the total amount. Julia smirked when she read it. Classic narcissist mistake, trying to control the narrative instead of protecting himself legally. A court date was set, and I prepared myself for the possibility of seeing him again. The day of the hearing, I wore a navy blue dress. Nothing flashy, just strong, steady. My hair pulled back, shoes comfortable, shoulders square. I looked in the mirror before leaving and whispered to my reflection, "You are not the girl who paid off his debt. You are the woman who stood back up." Eric arrived late, wearing a suit I recognized, one I'd bought for him 2 years ago for a client pitch he never attended. His face was still the same, but the way he carried himself was different. A little less sure, a little more cornered. He barely looked at me. The hearing wasn't long. Julia spoke confidently, presenting our evidence without drama. She laid out the pattern of behavior, the forged logins, the mismatched dates, the cross-reference statements that proved where the money went. Eric's lawyer, a young man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, read his rebuttal in a monotone voice, stumbling over the claim that I had verbally consented to each transfer. The judge didn't need long. He ruled in our favor. Eric was ordered to repay the full amount, plus penalties, over the next 5 years, via court-supervised restitution. His access to shared accounts was formally terminated, and his name was flagged for further monitoring by 2 banks. No jail time, but a record, a paper trail, and finally, accountability. When it was over, I walked out without looking back. Not because I was being dramatic, but because there was nothing back there for me anymore. That chapter had ended. Permanently. In the weeks that followed, I felt a strange mix of emotion, relief, sadness, triumph, emptiness, but mostly, closure. The legal process hadn't erased what he did, but it proved I was right to stand up, to fight back, to name the damage and demand that it be acknowledged, not just emotionally, but officially. One night, I was having dinner with Maya again. She raised a toast across the table. "To justice," she said. I shook my head with a small smile. "No," I replied, "to clarity. Because that's what I really won." And she nodded. Because clarity, real, painful, sobering clarity, is what sets you free. Eric didn't just lose a court case. He lost the power to rewrite my story. And I got the last word. Not with vengeance, but with truth. And that's something no one could ever take from me again. There's something about a fresh start that doesn't announce itself with trumpets. It comes quietly, softly, like sunlight creeping through a window you forgot to close, like laughter bubbling up during a casual lunch with friends, like hearing your own voice, clear, steady, confident, and realizing you haven't flinched in weeks. That's how it happened for me, not with a grand gesture or some cinematic montage of healing, but with the slow, deliberate stitching of new habits, new joy, new peace. After the court case closed, after the restitution payments began trickling in, slowly but surely, I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. But it was a good kind of tired, the kind that comes after you've crossed a finish line you weren't sure you'd ever reach. I didn't rush to fill the silence he left behind. I didn't swipe right or throw myself into new relationships. I rested. Because surviving betrayal is not just about leaving. It's about learning to sit with the silence that follows, and not mistaking it for emptiness. I focused on the things I had neglected: my writing, my health, my joy. I started every morning with a walk, no earbuds, no podcasts, just the sound of my breath and my feet hitting the pavement. It grounded me in ways therapy never could. And speaking of therapy, I went back, not because I was broken, but because I was ready. Ready to understand how I let someone like Eric into my life. Ready to forgive myself. Ready to move forward without dragging the weight of guilt behind me. My therapist, a kind-eyed woman named Sonia, once said to me, "You're not healing because you got justice. You're healing because you're finally being honest with yourself." She was right. I had spent so long trying to be the good partner, the one who stays, who believes, who forgives. But now, I was learning to be something else entirely. The woman who leaves. The woman who says no. The woman who doesn't explain her worth to anyone. I got a new job, contracting part-time with a startup that valued my experience and my boundaries. The founder was a woman who told me during our interview, "We don't reward burnout here." I nearly cried. I started hosting small writing workshops at a local library. 10 women in a circle, sharing stories they were once too ashamed to tell. Divorce, estrangement, toxic families, ghosted friendships, and always, healing. Because stories heal. Being heard heals. At the end of one session, a woman pulled me aside and said, "You don't know me, but your story gave me permission to leave someone who made me feel invisible." I nodded, and for a moment, we just stood there. Two women who had once been shadows, now reflecting light back at each other. That night, I sat in bed with my journal, the same one I'd bought after leaving Eric, and wrote a single line across the page. Peace isn't the absence of pain, it's the presence of self. I believed that now. Truly, for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for a text, an apology, a sign. I wasn't scrolling through social media to see if someone had moved on, or if they regretted what they'd done. I didn't need their regret. I had my life back, and it was quiet and slow and perfectly mine. One Saturday afternoon, Maya and I went on a small weekend retreat by the coast. Just the two of us, no plans, no schedules. We spent a rainy evening drinking wine on the balcony of our cabin, wrapped in thick blankets, watching the waves crash in the dark. She turned to me and said, "Do you think you'll ever fall in love again?" I took a breath. "I hope so," I said, "but not with someone who takes from me, with someone who meets me where I already am. And if not, that's okay too." She clinked her glass to mine. "To meeting yourself first." "To finally loving her," I said, and smiled. Because I did. I loved her. The woman who had once stared at a birthday dinner, blinking back tears. The woman who had uncovered the truth one receipt at a time. The woman who had sat across from the other woman, not with rage, but with clarity. The woman who had left, stayed gone, and never looked back. Me. And loving myself wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of the next one. Some endings don't come with closure. Some don't come with fireworks or fanfare, or even a knock on the door. Some endings come silently, in the way a heart finally stops looking over its shoulder. It had been a year, 12 full months since I packed my life into 2 suitcases and walked out of an apartment that was never really a home. Since I opened that bank account and closed a chapter I once mistook for love. 12 months of rebuilding, of reclaiming, of remembering who I was before him, and getting to know the version of me who came after. It was a Sunday morning in early spring when I realized something had changed, not dramatically, subtly, quietly. I was standing in the middle of my studio, sunlight spilling across the hardwood floor, a cup of tea warm in my hands. My phone buzzed on the counter, and I didn't even flinch. It wasn't him. It hadn't been in months. And for the first time, I didn't care. I didn't need to check. I didn't need to wonder, because he no longer lived in the back of my mind. He was no longer the weight I carried. He was simply gone. Not erased, not forgotten, just faded. Reduced to a lesson. A reminder of what I would never allow again. Later that afternoon, I met Maya at the farmer's market. We wandered past booths of fresh bread, tulips, beeswax candles. She picked out lavender. I picked out rosemary. The sun warmed our shoulders, and the breeze smelled like early promise. At one stall, a man complimented my laugh. Not my dress, not my figure, my laugh. I smiled, thanked him, and didn't feel the need to make it mean anything, because I wasn't searching anymore. I wasn't filling a void. I was full. On the walk back to my apartment, I passed the old bookstore, the one where Eric and I first met. It was still there, same dusty windows, same crooked awning, but it didn't hurt to look at it. I didn't feel a pang of nostalgia, just appreciation. That place had given me something once, a beginning, and now it gave me something else, proof that I had moved on. Back at home, I lit a candle and opened my laptop. I hadn't written about Eric in months. Not for the workshop, not for my journal, not even in my thoughts. But that night, I wrote a letter. To the woman still inside the relationship. To her. You're not crazy. You're not too much. You're not too emotional, too needy, too soft. You're someone who loves deeply, and he mistook that love for leverage. But you will rise. You will walk away. And when you do, the silence will feel loud at first, but then it will feel holy. You will fill it with your own voice, and when you speak again, it will be the sound of someone who knows exactly who she is. I promise I saved it. Not to send, not to publish, but to remember. Because the story didn't end when I left. The story began when I stopped begging to stay. And if you're listening to this now, curled up in your own quiet moment, wondering if your pain has a purpose, let me whisper this to you gently. It does. You will survive. You will breathe again. And not just breathe. You will sing. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But someday you will look at your own reflection and recognize her again. She's coming back. She's always been there, waiting for you to choose her. And when you do, everything changes. Even the pain, even the betrayal, even the parts that felt like they broke you, will one day be the very things that made you unshakable. That's the real ending. Or maybe it's just the beginning. Good night.